After having reviewed the original trilogy of the Ratchet & Clank franchise, I'm now tackling the Future Trilogy, and this time I'm reviewing the games chronologically. Since I want to publish the reviews on the game's release dates, that means this Tools of Destruction review is hopefully out on October 23rd, the Quest for Booty review should be out on August 21st of next year, and the A Crack in Time review will drop a few months after on October 27th, if everything goes according to plan. Considering how long some of my Ratchet & Clank Month videos have gotten delayed, you should take this release schedule with a grain of salt, but at least it's a lot more feasible than usual. By the way, I've decided to not do another RNC month for this year, because I already have my hands full with other stuff, and I wanted to release this RNC review outside of November anyway. Considering their release dates, that'll be the case with most other reviews of RNC games, including Ratchet Deadlocked, which I haven't forgotten about, I just decided to cover the Future series first. On that note, Ratchet & Clank Future Tools of Destruction. This is a very interesting title, as it's the first RNC to come out on the PlayStation 3, and is the first game in the Future Trilogy, which sought to make the series more cinematic and story-driven. How did this direction pan out? Well, Tools of Destruction is the third best reviewed game in the RNC franchise, with a Metascore as high as 89, only 2 points away from the top. That said, it doesn't seem to be that lauded by the general public, compared to the original trilogy, A Crack in Time, and Rift Apart. What do I think? I guess I'm somewhere in the middle, because while I don't consider it to be on par with the absolute best RNC games, I do feel that people often underrate how good it is. Allow me to explain why as I review Tools of Destruction.
Who did you say gave you this thing?
The Sony. They are little invisible creatures who travel through time.
Oh, right.
Ratchet & Clank Future Tools of Destruction was released on October 23, 2007, and was Insomniac Games' first console shift with the franchise, transitioning from the PlayStation 2 to the PlayStation 3. It sold 1 million copies according to VG charts, which I'm not sure I believe, as this was one of the few notable PS3 exclusives at the time, so I would assume it sold better, and VG charts used to claim it had sold more than 2.5 million copies. Perhaps that site isn't that reliable after all. At least the greatest hits version confirms that it has sold over 500,000 copies. In any case, it was received really well by critics, who particularly praised its impressive visuals reminiscent of Pixar movies. For your information, I recorded this game on a PlayStation 5, streaming the PS3 version through internet connection, which wasn't always the most stable, so the footage may not always be representative of how the game actually runs. I would have recorded it on the PS3 if my HDMI splitter still worked. I should probably get a new one.
Do you think this Lombax secret could be the weapon used to vaporize the Cragmites?
Whatever it is, we need to get to it before Tachyon does.
A Cragmite named Percival Tachyon searches for Ratchet on Metropolis in the Solana Galaxy so that he can kill the last remaining Lombax. Ratchet and Clank escape and end up in a foreign galaxy named Polaris, where they search for something called the Lombax Secret, which supposedly has the power to defeat Tachyon, as it had previously been used by the Lombaxes to vanquish the other Cragmites.
If you are being attacked by a radioactive amoeboid, please press 1. If you've been ingested by a mutant space eel, please press 2. If your city is being attacked by a massive deadly space armada, please press 3.
The writing is probably Tools of Destruction's biggest point of contention, as it completely changed Ratchet & Clank's writing style. Before, the franchise leaned towards comedy, being a satirical take on capitalism, whereas the Future series goes for a more dramatic story-driven experience, tackling themes of family, revenge, and destiny. Ratchet is apparently the last of his kind and is longing to find the other Lombaxes, and Clank seemingly also has a big part to play in the grand scheme of things, considering his relation to the mystical Sony. While I favor the writing style of the PlayStation 2 games, I still enjoy the direction of the Future series, but I can't deny that it gave rise to some blatant retcons. No one in previous games ever pointed out that Ratchet is the last of his kind, and Ratchet didn't act surprised seeing Angela Cross, another Lombax, which he definitely would have now. Also, it's weird that it took so long for Tachyon to find out about Ratchet when he and Clank have been huge intergalactic heroes for years. With those problems out of the way, how is the writing otherwise? By no means perfect, but pretty good I'd say. The story has some intriguing mystery regarding the Lombax secret, which is eventually revealed to be the Dimensionator, a hat that can be used to open rifts to other dimensions. It's no wonder the Lombaxes managed to vanquish the Kragmites, banishing them to another dimension. That is except for Percival Tachyon, who was interestingly enough discovered by the Lombaxes and raised by them. Of course, he ended up turning on them after discovering what the Lombaxes did to his species. I guess they didn't think that one through. Tachyon has an interesting backstory, but I must admit that I don't like his character much otherwise. He's portrayed as obnoxious and somewhat incompetent, which puts into question how he's become such a powerful force in the Polaris galaxy. That's because he's extremely clever and a brilliant engineer, but we're not really shown that. It doesn't help that he's got a very grating voice, making him a tough listen.
Great! Quit messing around and get over here! I have boils that require lancing.
Nevertheless, he does contribute a lot to the detailed lore, which probably entails the best writing in Tools of Destruction, making Polaris feel like a truly lived-in galaxy with a rich history concerning unique species. One of these species is the Kerchu, skilled construction workers that are aggressively hostile towards foreigners. Another fun fact is that absolutely everyone is allergic to them, which is so funny to consider. I wonder if Max Apogee sneezed himself out of existence while he hid the Dimensionator in Kerchu City. His whereabouts is another intriguing mystery, and his daughter Talwyn Apogee plays a decent role in Tools of Destruction. I like how her search for her father parallels Ratchet's search for his kind. There's even fascinating lore regarding Grummelnet, which is Polaris Galaxy's equivalent of Gadgetron or Megacorp. The Grummel's home planet got destroyed, leaving a single remaining survivor who mass cloned himself to run a galaxy-wide business selling weapons and armors. You get most of these lore bits from talking to the smuggler and the Iris supercomputer. A neat thing about the first two RNC games is that they contain plenty of unique side characters that you only see once or twice throughout the game, so the smuggler is controversial for conveniently showing up various times during Tools of Destruction, making the galaxy feel smaller. Despite this, I do enjoy talking to the smuggler. He gives you some useful stuff, and his parrot can be quite funny. The Iris supercomputer is also fun to talk to, offering so many fun facts. Captain Quark's full name is apparently Copernicus Leslie Quark, and she answers what the final digit of pi is, which is a fun little nod to when Clank was about to reveal it in Going Commando.
Final digit of pi is...
Clank? Clank, can you hear me?
Ratchet? Where are we? I must have dozed off.
The answer is 6, by the way. Only a few people know this. She also says that Slim Cognito is imprisoned at Sordoom, and we do hear the speaker lady mention him while we visit that place, as well as Ace Hardlight, interestingly enough. Flint Vorsalon is also locked up there, foreshadowing a character that later appears in A Crack in Time. Alistair Azimuth is also foreshadowed, the Court of Azimuth fittingly being the area where Ratchet and Clank fight Tachyon. I like that Tools of Destruction sets up stuff to connect the Future Trilogy together, while also paying homage to the older games. It makes it feel like it exists as part of the RNC canon despite the retcons. Another thing the Iris supercomputer explains is that Tachyon made the robot space pirates, but they're interestingly not in cahoots with each other at this point in the timeline, as Tachyon abandoned them after they scavenged all the materials he needed to build his empire. The space pirates provide some of the best comedy in the game, especially Captain Slag and Rusty Pete. They're such a good comedic duo, playing off each other well and singing some surprisingly vulgar shanties.
Quick, hide!
It's not land a pirate evermore.
It's good to see there's still some raunchiness, including Tools of Destruction continuing the innuendo title tradition RNC is known for. The game's comedy is otherwise a bit hit or miss. Kronk and Zephyr are a good example of this, who play into the senile old boomer trope, and I do enjoy some of their roasts.
Hey, Rookie! Kronk here! If you get the chance, you should stop and admire some of them giant fossils.
Admire them? You went to school with half of them.
But at other times it's just the typical kids these days and
Get off my lawn!
jokes. I think part of why the game struggles a bit to deliver good comedy is that it doesn't keep the satirical elements from the PS2 games, which had a vast, yet limited pool to pull from. Tools of Destruction meanwhile seems to go for anything, which can make certain jokes feel out of place. Captain Quark, for instance, randomly brings up zombie ninja panda bears in his crayon animated plan of infiltrating Zor Doom prison. I'm glad Quark's crayon animation returned at least, and he is one of the funnier characters in the game to be fair, occasionally delivering comedy gold.
You're right. This is not the time for vanity. It's the time to show the universe how amazingly awesome I am. I'm sorry, Ratchet. I hope you never have to endure the pressure of saving an entire galaxy. Wish me luck.
That said, he's not as funny as he used to be, partly due to this new comedic style. I guess it's worth mentioning that comedy isn't prioritized as much because Tools of Destruction goes for a more serious tone, but honestly, I think the PS2 games tackled certain serious elements better too. Quark is again a good example, as he had a terrific arc over the original trilogy, and while I do think he still acts in character in Tools of Destruction, he's just not as interesting. Another good example is Ratchet and Clank's relationship, which developed quite naturally in the original game, understandably being rocky at first, considering their polar opposite personalities and motivations, but becoming stronger over time as they found common ground. Tools of Destruction does a similar thing where Ratchet distrusts Clank for a while, but it doesn't make as much sense, because they've built such a trusting bond by this point, not to mention that Clank turns out to be right every single time, so it feels like drama for drama's sake. I'll admit that I love the scene where Ratchet and Clank reconcile after Ratchet thought Clank had died. I also love the scene near the end where Tachyon offers Ratchet the opportunity to go to the Lombax dimension, but stays behind to protect his own dimension. It's a very nice conclusion to Ratchet's character arc in this game. Speaking of nice conclusions, I have to talk about that ending. Tools of Destruction ends on a bold cliffhanger where Clank gets abducted by the Sony, leaving Ratchet alone and depressed. This had me sobbing as a kid. I couldn't believe that I had to wait a while for later games to get him back. Cliffhangers are often annoying, but this one is so powerful. The only downside is that triumphant music plays as it happens, followed by celebration music in the credits, completely missing the tone. That basically sums up Tools of Destruction's writing. It contributes a lot of good, but burns some bridges in the process. Gameplay is undoubtedly where Tools of Destruction excels. For starters, it has some of the smoothest controls in the series, particularly the camera, which moves like butter. It is so beneficial to have a game that almost always feels good to play. It definitely raises the gameplay rating as a whole, along with my enjoyment factor. Ratchet controls super well as usual. Deadlocked still has the best combat up until this point, but the general movement is better in Tools of Destruction. The Clank gameplay is also the best so far. Clank commands Sony this time instead of Gadgetbots, who have cooler abilities, like shooting energy projectiles, telekinetically moving objects, and allowing Clank to float for a bit. Clank himself can slow down time, allowing him to get through parts that are way too fast for him. There are 3 mandatory Clank sections, and I'll admit they can drag down the pace a bit, but they're pretty fun, especially the one inside the Iris supercomputer. Many consider the Aphelion levels to be pace breakers, where you fight robot space pirates in space, but I personally really enjoy them. They offer simple, yet fun on-rails spaceship combat, not to mention some of the best looking visuals in the game. They also control really well, like most other parts of the game. Some of the few instances in which the gameplay doesn't feel smooth is whenever the DualShock 3 6-axis motion controls are utilized, but fortunately that's a mechanic you can turn off, so it's not even a factor. That is except for the tornado launcher weapon, which can be finicky to steer because of that. The weapons lineup is otherwise great, not to mention entirely original, which it should be, considering it's a new galaxy and console era of Ratchet and Clank. The Shard Reaper is one of my favorite shotguns in the series, because while it's fairly standard and becomes useless later on, it just feels so good to use, courtesy of Tools of Destruction's aforementioned smoothness. The Buzz Blades are one of my favorite weapons in the entire franchise. They're such an upgrade of the slower chopper and disc blade launcher. Speaking of favorites, it's crazy to me that you get an incredible weapon like the Alpha Disruptor for free, halfway through the game, and it's not even on an optional path. It doesn't have much ammunition, but it's as powerful as a super weapon and feels super satisfying to use. The Magnet Launcher is such a good restraining weapon, as it simultaneously stops enemies in their tracks and hurts them. They're perfectly designed for the Kragmites, who become invincible while teleporting, which they annoyingly do after every hit, but not if they're caught in a magnet. Perhaps my favorite weapon in Tools of Destruction are the Razor Claws. These are a melee weapon, so they're risky to use, but the reward is great, as they become more powerful by stacking up kills without getting hit. However, my favorite aspect about them is that they can be used to glitch climb up walls, which is so much fun. And it's so easy to do that even a non-speedrunner like myself can do it. It's such a shame that it didn't reoccur in a later game, which it almost did as the Talon Claws in A Crack in Time. That would have been awesome, especially since that game doesn't have a melee weapon discounting the wrench. Of course, I can't neglect to talk about the Rhino 4, which might be the most powerful weapon in the whole franchise, firing countless powerful lasers in quick succession. The Rhino Forever at max level has 900 ammo and kills enemies and bosses instantaneously. It's ridiculous and I love it. I love the way in which you acquire this absolute beast. For previous Rhinos, you just had to save up enough bolts to buy them, but from this game onwards, you have to go on a treasure hunt to find a complete holoplan and give it to someone who can make it. It's a new super valuable collectible that encourages more exploration, which is wonderful if you ask me. The weapons can be upgraded with Raritanium, and although the upgrading system isn't as good as the one in Deadlocked, it's still really nice. You can add more ammo, range, damage, and other improvements, making the weapons more powerful over time. You can approach this system in so many ways. I like to quickly increase Raritanium drops for the weapons that have that kind of upgrade, so that I can unlock other upgrades faster. Speaking of upgrading, weapons still gain experience and level up from using them, and this time their max level is 10, or X if you're one of the cool kids. This gives a lot of replay value to each weapon, at least until they're fully upgraded. It can take a while for some of them to get there, particularly the Nano Swarmers, which barely gain any experience despite killing countless enemies. This is really annoying, especially when some other weapons upgrade instantly. It reeks of poor balancing. In addition to weapons, there are devices. These can't level up, which I'm honestly fine with, as they're mainly useful for special occasions. Mr. Zircon can be deployed if I want to kill enemies or bosses faster, and if I want to listen to a trash-talking menace.
You dare to hurt measly furball?
I don't enjoy listening to him anymore, as he's been so overused over the series, but he was a fresh concept back in 2007. Leech bombs are good for when I'm low on health, even though they don't heal you that much, but every bit helps. If I'm really in a pinch, I can use a Groovatron to stop enemies or bosses in their tracks. It's such an impressive device, granting well-animated dances to every enemy, boss, and NPC in the game. As much as I love it, I can't deny how overpowered it is, especially the Golden Groovatron, which has infinite ammo and can be deployed in the middle of an already active Groovatron. It makes sense then that it costs 2 million Raritanium, but then again, that doesn't take long to accumulate when it's so easy to earn currency in challenge mode. Seriously, you get millions of bolts every level, especially if you manage to keep the bolt multiplier at times 20. A weird balancing issue I've noticed in Tools of Destruction is that you can die so easily in the first challenge mode, even with the strongest armor, whereas in the second challenge mode, you're practically invincible, especially if you solely use the Rhino Forever and the Golden Groovatron. Now that's just cheating. On that topic, it's pretty insane that visiting weapons vendors automatically refills your health, especially since you can do it infinitely in combat areas. The gadgets are also great. Amazing classics like the Swing Shot, Grind Boots, Helipack, Thruster Pack, Hydro Pack, and Charge Boots return, and they're about as good as they've always been. I love that you can interrupt some of these, like slamming the Omni Wrench to the ground while using the Thruster Pack. It's such a seamless transition that allows for precise positioning. You can interrupt the Charge Boots as well, so that you'll go the exact distance you want. They can't charge forever like in RNC 2 and 3, but they can be reused in quick succession, which is honestly more efficient. There are some great grind rail sections, particularly at Sordoom Prison and on Planet Jacindu against the Kerchu boss. Swimming with the Hydro Pack is as smooth as ever, seriously still some of the best underwater movement in gaming. The original Robo-Wings also feel incredible to use. I love the ability to fly around levels, especially the open world of Sargasso. The gyrocycle controls really well too, and is used in some super fun courses, though it's perhaps a bit underused. The Hologuise is back in the form of the Holo Pirate disguise, which is just as slow, but tricks robot space pirates this time. I like saluting with it, making other robot space pirates salute with me, and dancing the jig is pretty funny.
To the sky! Shake your booty!
The Gelinator is one of the best gadgets, shooting out jelly to bounce on, adding some amazing platforming. I love going out of bounds with it, especially combined with the Razor Claws. Not all the gadgets are that good. The Decryptor, for example, is a pretty slow hacking device, and connecting the dots with a geolaser can be a bit finicky. The helipods are probably the worst, as their aim doesn't even work half the time, which can lead to some frustration. On the whole though, the gadgets are damn great. I don't find most bosses in RNC all that impressive, but they're above average in Tools of Destruction. The space combat bosses are very simple, but also quite fun to fight, especially those that encourage continuous use of the barrel roll. Crushto and Sorthon aren't that good, but they're not bad for arena bosses. The Kerchu boss is very impressive visually and has a really fun grind rail section as the first half, but I'll admit the second half feels like a bullet sponge. Also, dying in the second phase sends you back to the first, which makes it even more of a drag. Captain Slag is definitely the best boss fight in the game, encouraging you to cycle between different weapons to deal with his projectiles and minions. The final boss against Tachyon is really good and has a cool second stage where you're stranded on an asteroid in a different dimension. That said, the difficulty balancing is all over the place, as Tachyon will barely take damage from the Rhino 4 at one point, but have his health be instantly depleted at another. Finally, there's the levels. Tools of Destruction has a lot of them, about 20, and most of them are so damn good. In my Up Your Arsenal review, I criticized many of its levels for being too combat focused and basic, with a lack of branching paths. Tools of Destruction fortunately has several levels with branching paths, and even those that don't contain them are usually very open regardless. Of course, the first level has a single path, but Metropolis still feels so big and varied, and I still find the spectacle impressive to this day. What a fantastic introduction. It might be my favorite opening level. Fastoon is an open level that allows you to collect the 5 necessary components in whichever order you'd like, which is quite refreshing. Some levels allow you to kill and collect the souls of Leviathans and Grunthors, which can be exchanged for plenty of bolts in the bank. There are so many of these to find on planet Sargasso, which is my favorite level in the game, and part of my top 10 of the whole franchise. It's the biggest RNC level up until this point, yet it doesn't feel too big unlike previous open world levels, because it offers more variety and free traversal with the Robo-Wings. The Robo-Wings are introduced in Stratus City, another amazing level where you can use the Gelinator as well, making for some of the best gameplay. There are a few levels that focus primarily on combat, but those feel fresh too, since there's so much space to operate within. I'll admit Mukau's combat arena is the tamest one yet, as it's incredibly easy and doesn't feature a challenge with loads of rounds, but it still feels really good to play. That's pretty much the bottom line, that almost everything I do in this game feels so good, making Tools of Destruction one of my absolute favorite gameplay experiences. Ratchet & Clank made such a clean transition from PlayStation 2 to 3 that I didn't even notice Tools of Destruction looking all that different when I first played it back in the day. Of course, it does look vastly different in hindsight, but it is easy to see that it's the same franchise. It helps that Metropolis was used to reintroduce the series, as it's probably the most iconic RNC location, and it's given justice. This first level is a fantastic showcase of the PS3's capabilities, numerous objects populating the screen, a lot of them being destroyed in real time, including bridges and buildings, all the while running at a steady 60 frames per second. Most of the other levels don't offer this much spectacle, but they're still quite detailed and lived in. Creely Comet in particular looks gorgeous with its shiny and dynamic skybox, and the inside of the Iris supercomputer is just as stunning. Speaking of eye candy, the Aphelion levels also offer some of the prettiest looking visuals in the game, which is impressive considering space is known for being dark and empty. The Apogee space station is also filled with detail, featuring these awesomely peculiar looking displays that I'm guessing is concept art for the game. There's generally a good variety of environments and colors between levels, making them feel distinct. From what I've observed, it took a few years for PS3 games to achieve cutting-edge graphics. Resistance 2 from 2008 looks so much better than Resistance 1 from 2006. Uncharted 2 from 2009 looks considerably better than Uncharted 1 from 2007, and A Crack in Time from 2009 looks notably better than Tools of Destruction from 2007. That said, Tools of Destruction is impressively pretty for its time, and has probably aged better than the photorealistic Resistance and Uncharted due to its cartoony art style. Not everything is aged that well though, particularly Ratchet's character model. I used to think he looked amazing, but he looks rough by today's standards. Most other character models look great, with cool and varied designs of new friends and foes, and nice touch-ups to recurring characters, even though I miss Quark's butt chin. There's still great attention to detail though, like the tiny fish-like Drophids getting ejected from their armor when they're destroyed, and then you can squish them. It's a morbid, yet charming detail. Not everything has been accounted for, as there are some glitches that weren't patched out before launch, but they're mostly visual and not game-breaking. Floating crates are more amusing than annoying if you ask me. Considering Tools of Destruction's more serious approach, it made sense for this game to feature more cinematic cutscenes, and they're directed really well, with atmospheric music to sell the movie-like feeling. Insomniac went for a Pixar-like feeling specifically, and they definitely succeeded, considering how many critics praised Tools of Destruction for capturing the Pixar vibe. In retrospect, this old game looks nowhere near as good as even the oldest Pixar movies, but it did feel like one back in 2007. I like that this game doesn't only rely on these types of cutscenes either, occasionally changing art styles, like Quark's aforementioned crayon animation for his Sword Doom infiltration plan, the comic-esque documentary for the Iris supercomputer, and even an 8-bit styled cutscene for the Imperial Fight Festival. I appreciate the variety and creativity, and they tend to be complemented by some nice voice acting.
In the unlikely event that the Dimensionator creates a time-space singularity and tears the fabric of the universe asunder, please log an A-bug and notify a programmer immediately.
The voice acting for returning characters is as wonderful as ever, and the new ones are mostly great as well. I say mostly because Tachyon doesn't sound very good, but I think that's mainly a problem with his voice direction.
Is this? No. No! What, you infernal machine!
It doesn't help that he constantly yaps over screens across several planets, but on the bright side, a lot of that gets drowned out by other noises.
In order to keep our casualty rate low, we ask that you remain in your homes during this period of transition.
Yeah, the sound mixing is often quite unbalanced, making it hard to hear what characters say during gameplay, and there are no subtitles to look at either, which is an issue when characters talk so often. I'd like to hear all the anti-Lombax propaganda more clearly.
Attention citizens of Cabalia. Never forget the horrors and atrocities committed by the Lombax species. We cannot allow even one of these dreadful creatures to survive.
Captain Quark is especially impossible to hear in the arena, which is a crime given what a golden opportunity it is for him to be the arena commentator. The Sony might be the easiest to listen to, because they basically ear rape you. I find this more funny than annoying, to be honest, but it is part of the larger problem. There's a lot of top-notch voice acting in this game, so it's a shame I can't properly hear much of it. Lastly, there's the soundtrack, which is still composed by the legendary David Berchot. I'm no music expert, so I can't give a very fair critique, but I can say that I feel like Tools of Destruction soundtrack is a downgrade compared to the PS2 era of RNC music. Like the game, it goes for a different tone, with music that stands out far less than the usually high-octane PS2 themes, and I personally much prefer the latter. Even so, Tools of Destruction soundtrack is really good, and the Metropolis theme is one of my favorites in the entire franchise. It captures the drama and chaos of the level so well, with unique sounding instruments. It sadly goes downhill after that. Even the tracks that are reminiscent of PS2 RNC compositions aren't nearly as noteworthy or memorable. That said, there are some gems here and there, particularly all the pirate music, which give off a cool thematic vibe. Some of the pirate themes actually sound like the main theme of Pirates of the Caribbean, which is a great composition, so I don't mind the similarity. There are some fairly good atmospheric themes as well, in places like Cabalia, Mukau, and Sargasso. The music in the revisiting of Fast Tune feels pretty epic, appropriate for a final level. Even though the credits music is way too uplifting considering the circumstances, I can't deny that Let's Celebrate slaps. So does the Groovytron music, which is very memorable. It's criminal that Death to Squishies is exclusive to Japan.
Let's go to the party. Ready and excited and tomorrow, darling, life. Make this goes out to all real love across the galaxy. It's time for you and me to rise up and strike back. Don't stop until we don't even want to be great. When it's time to let organic.
I can't say that Tools of Destruction has any bad or even mediocre tracks, but the soundtrack does unfortunately get overshadowed by David Berchot's past work. I am glad that he was still involved at this point, though. I definitely came to miss him when he left.
Ratchet, are you all right?
Where are we?
We are home, Ratchet.
I hope I've done a good job explaining why Ratchet & Clank Future Tools of Destruction is an underrated game. I have tackled various problems with it, but to be fair, nothing is perfect, and the positives heavily outweigh the negatives anyway. Speaking of which, the game offers a pretty well told story that ties into even better realized lore, which makes the entirely new Polaris Galaxy feel like it's existed for eons. The gameplay is amazing, being the smoothest RNC game by this point, and featuring plenty of well-designed open levels. The visuals look fantastic for its time, and a lot of it still looks good today, plus the soundtrack is really well composed. As for my issues, the mostly good writing is often undercut in some way, whether it be due to retcons, unfocused humor, or random tone shifts. I don't have many problems with the gameplay, but I suppose the biggest issue is the balancing, as it can be all over the place. The audio mixing is kinda bad at many points, and while the soundtrack is solid, it's the weakest in the series thus far. Based on these criticisms, I'm comfortable giving Ratchet & Clank Future Tools of Destruction the great rating of 8.5 out of 10. This is the same rating I gave Up Your Arsenal, which is generally considered better, and I do agree that it is, but only slightly. A big reason Tools of Destruction isn't hailed as one of the greats is because it lacks innovation, but such is the case for Up Your Arsenal as well, and it's often considered the best game in the franchise. They're both great games in spite of this, and the main reason I don't rate them higher is because they don't nail every aspect, which I think Going Commando and A Crack in Time do for the most part. Either way, Tools of Destruction did well in kickstarting the Future series and the new console era of RNC. It's no masterpiece, but I love it, enough for it to be part of my top 10 favorite video games, number 8 at the moment. I'm Arcadon, and hopefully, you'll see me next time!